right, my friends, how are we doing so far? Are you loving it yet? Are you inspired? I'm really hoping that this is something that you're enjoying as the more we're getting into it. Okay, so we have centered our hexie flower onto the muslin square with a whip stitch. And again, I mentioned feel free to use a traditional running stitch as you would a quilt piece, going around the edges. Now we're going to stitch this little vintage button onto the top right hand corner, or the one of the corners. I guess it won't matter whichever way you're looking. So let's do that. Now these little buttons came in a box that I found, and they are the prettiest little vintage shell buttons. So some of them have 4 holes, some had 2, but I just love that each one had kind of its own unique shape. So we will find a corner, and I guess it's just wherever you think. I had thought about the center, but I like it off to the side. And again, you can decide if you want the back with more of the little character, the ridges. Let's do that side. And you want to keep it within. Think about this being your seam allowance around the edge. It's going to be kind of tight, so you want to make sure it's inside that seam allowance. Again, I was hoping for this kit that it was simple enough that if you just have basic sewing skills, people say, well, I can't even sew on a button. If you can sew on a button, then I think you should be all right. So we're going to secure this little button. And I love, if there's 4 holes, I like to do a crisscross stitch. Not just the, over and over. I like to do a little X. So if you have one of those buttons, then maybe you can do that. All right, I think our button is secure. So the next step, let's just tie this off. And snip. Create another knot at the end. Now we're going to put right sides together. Our square of our calico over. So you might have, I tried to cut and make sure I had enough fabric to cover your muslin. Now you can do this one of 2 ways. On one of my cushions, I used my little treadle sewing machine and just stitched around and left an opening. On one of the other cushions, I stitched it by hand. Sometimes I feel like I have a little more control when I stitch by hand, so it's just your preference and what you have available. So we're going to leave about this much of an opening because we want to be able to turn it inside out and do the stuffing. So let's make sure we leave an opening. So wherever you begin, again, you're going to just maybe go along that edge, and you'll see where your stitches are for your little hexies. Make sure you leave room. And we're just going to do kind of this remember what you call this, back stitch, running stitch. It's you go back a little bit, you come through, go back, come a little further, go back. And again, this is not a project that has to be exact perfection. It is mainly to get your mind off of any of the stressors and worries. Because when you work with your hands, when you're sewing, you're stitching, it releases endorphins, and endorphins are the things that bring joy and the sense of well-being and peace. And so it's a time where you fix your cup of tea or your cup of coffee, and you sit out on your porch in the evening or early morning when it's cool, and just have some time to yourself. Okay, so you're going to you see how these stitches are going around? And if you just line up, just keep your needle going parallel with, whoops, keep it going parallel with your edge of your fabric, you should be fine. All right, I'm going to stop and finish this, or stop the video, and I will continue around and bring you back when I have my opening.